St. Mark's on what is for us a very beautiful, sunny, crisp day, actually a warm day here in the fall. Maybe we'll get a mild winter, who knows. But welcome, and welcome to anyone who may be joining us as a guest of the church. We are very pleased when people other than our own are given to joining us at events like this. And this event, like those that have preceded it, are designed to inform you and perhaps inspire you, and in any event to broaden your horizon on certain subjects from the experts in those areas. Now, I have to warn you that Steve Dutton, who's with us today, is an absolute dyed-in-the-wool Crimson Tide, University of Alabama football fan. You can live with that, though. I can, at least, because he had the heart and the courage and to congratulate me on the win of the Steelers a while back over the Dallas Cowboys. So thanks,
congratulations,
Steve, and welcome to St. Mark's Lutheran Church. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So glad to be here.
So other than the Crimson Tide and your Alabama raising, huh?
Mm-hmm.
What else is there in your background that would be helpful for us to know?
Well, I am the oldest in a family of 3 boys. I'm married, and I'm married to another chaplain who is the senior director of spiritual care and chaplaincy services at Johns Hopkins Hospital, Paula Teague. We have 3 children. I have, my oldest has a little 2-year-old son that I'm very, very excited about. And we're planning to get COVID tested this coming weekend so they can visit with us the following weekend. We're going to do our Thanksgiving celebration the 20th and 21st. And so I have a second son, middle son, who still lives in Alabama, and I have a youngest son who works with the Quakers in Philadelphia. He's the Associate Secretary of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. Paul and I are Quakers. We attended and are members at Wilmington Friends Meeting and here in Wilmington for a long time. So that's who I am. I began my ministry as a pastor, a Southern Baptist pastor, in a church, in churches in Alabama and Virginia and Kentucky. And then I went into clinical pastoral education and became a pastoral counselor and worked as a pastoral counseling center coordinator with Baptist Medical Centers in Birmingham. Probably the folks who are tuning in, Dave, can tell by the way I talk, I didn't grow up around here, right? And
yeah, it's not a South Philly accent.
No, it's not a South Philly accent, although I love South Philly accent. So my move into clinical pastoral education occurred when Paula came this way. She decided to bring me with her, and she was the director, associate director for CPE at Franciscan Health System in Philadelphia for many years before she went to Johns Hopkins. And then I did supervisory education at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital and worked at WellSpan, and then in 2003 came to Christiana as a manager of pastoral services and clinical pastoral education educator. We're called educators now instead of supervisors. So, and I love what I do. I love the moment that students feel like they're learning.
And I assure you, he's very good at it. I have a Johns Hopkins question I want to throw in because I'll forget it otherwise. Mm-hmm. They used to have a major pastoral event there on a yearly basis. Mm-hmm. And it was a couple-day thing, I think.
Yeah, it was.
And I attended that at least once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
Is that kaput? Or?
I think that is kaput. That happened for years and years and years. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I'm trying to remember as we talk what they called it. Paula served as faculty member in that and kind of pulling it together back in the day, but they haven't had that in a few years.
But boy, it drew pastors in from all over creation.
Yeah, a lot of them came every year.
Yeah.
They had a consistent following, and they had some really top names folks doing different things in healthcare and spiritual care and pastoral care and ministry issues. Yeah, I wish I had thought about that. I could remember what it was called, but it was consistently the same name, and it happened about the same time.
I can't grab it either, but I've thought about it on any number of times. Well, listen, okay, so you've been at Christiana Care for 17 years, so you and I have known each other that long.
That's right.
Because I've been involved in that program ever since its inception.
Right, and we won't let you stay. We won't let you leave.
Yeah, I keep trying to quit.
No, we won't let him quit.
It's a joy for me to watch this thing grow. I mean, it really is. And each, as you well know, each set of residents is a whole different ball game.
Different ball game.
And it's always intrigued me, and you know this, but I'll tell them, how a particular group of residents relate to each other. Because that's a memory I have from my own CPE residency at University of Virginia Medical Center in 1976. Were you even born yet?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not that much younger.
So let's start with the residency. We can go back and look at some of the other programs, but how's it work? How many people? How competitive is it? Those kind of things.
Yeah, so every year we have 6 residents who come, they interview, they have an extensive interview, actually. They have 2 interviews. They make application, we have an application committee who reviews the application and then confirms that their application is complete. Each resident has to have 1 unit of clinical pastoral education under their belt to become a resident. And then we have 2 interviews, one with a member of our professional advisory group, and you've been doing that for a long time for us, and we appreciate it very much. A second one with the director of the department and myself and another clinical pastoral education educator who's there. So we have 2 interviews, and then they come, usually start in August, go for a year, and they're assigned a clinical assignment in the 2 hospitals, 4 at Christiana Hospital, 2 at Wilmington Hospital. So they're assigned, the 4 clinical assignments at Christiana are cardiology, palliative care, trauma, and we call a Christiana generalist who's all over the place, who has several different units. And then the 2 at Wilmington are in family medicine, and then we have one where that chaplain works in psychiatry and in general surgical floors. So they stay in these units for the year so that they can develop relationships with staff and as well as work with patients and families who come as patients there. So, and the residents then, when they complete that year of residency, they are equipped to either become a board-certified chaplain, or they themselves might decide to move into supervisory education or education candidacy. So they're able to do either one. Most folks want to become a chaplain, and most folks find positions either in hospice or in other hospitals that are open. It is highly competitive. Typically, we have anywhere from 25 to 35 applicants for those 6 spots. We don't interview every one of those. We try to take the best students. But it's highly competitive. Now, there are other clinical pastoral education programs and centers in our area, so we're not the only one, most of whom are in Philadelphia and Baltimore, of course. But that there's still a real high competitive feel for those who are coming to Christiana. Because Christiana is such a wonderful hospital to do education. We've had pastoral care here since the 60s. CPE, first CPE program started in 1964, before there was an Association for Clinical Pastoral Education. So the hospital is like a large regional medical center that has medical education residents without a medical school. So it's not an academic medical center. We still have 14 residencies, which means that we have a lot of residents who are students, and staff are used to students, challenging and encouraging them to grow and learn. And so it's a great place to do clinical pastoral education.
I don't really have any points of comparison, so I'm going to trust that whatever is going on in other institutions is what it is, but I know for a fact that at Christiana Hospital there's real effort made to include the chaplaincy staff as functioning members of the hospital team.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes. All of our residents, and in fact we have an internship program too, and they're all given assignments as well. All of our chaplains are encouraged to be involved in rounds on the units where they work. So every unit has clinical rounds that includes doctors and the whole team, and chaplains are involved in those clinical rounds. And you're absolutely right, Dave, that the staff at Christiana expects the chaplain to function up and to be present. And so because of the presence of pastoral care and its visibility for so many years, they really expect a chaplain to be present. Now we have in our two hospitals around 1,100 beds. That's a lot of beds. And so the way we do ministry is primarily through referral, but our chaplains can go and knock on the door of anybody, except during this time of COVID-19, there's some limitations. But typically what happens is our chaplains, they like for example, our cardiology chaplain. That chaplain is assigned to all the cardiology floors, attends the cardiology rounds, and will sometimes take initiative to visit patients who maybe have been in the hospital for a while. Mm-hmm. So they make a discernment that that patient probably needs some support because they've been here for a while. So that's an example. They can go to the door and knock on the door. So the chaplain is a member of the healthcare team and has access to patients as a result of that.
And there's an expectation, at least on the department's end, and maybe on the other end as well, that chaplains should be chaplains to staff when things are dicey.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
which makes now
a really important time.
Sure.
Because a lot of our staff are really struggling because of the presence of COVID patients who themselves are struggling, who cannot have family members. That's what really makes it difficult for staff, I think, because you have a person who is diagnosed with COVID and who's sick enough to be in the hospital, which could very well lead to a ventilator, not necessarily, but could.
We just lost one here.
Okay, yeah. So what happens is that person can't have a visitor unless it's the end of life. That person can't have a visitor, and the way their family keeps in contact with them is on the telephone, through iPad, FaceTime, those kind of things. And I know of nurses who take their own phone because the patient doesn't have a phone. The nurse is in full PPE, and they go into the patient's room and facilitate them to have a conversation with a loved one who can't be there. I've even heard of nurses say that they've allowed a patient to say goodbye to their loved one who is dying because the impact of COVID-19 is that we can't have visitors in the hospital. Now that means the chaplain's role is even more important for the staff, because that's a burden for the staff.
Oh,
they don't like the idea of a patient in the hospital suffering alone. It's just not who they are, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So chaplains have a role with staff, not only as being a consultant about the care of the patient, but also as providing care for the staff.
Okay. Now, there's a little room.
Mm-hmm.
You know it, I know it, right next to your office there, and that's where you meet for didactics and some other things. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, so what a resident does is that they meet every Tuesday morning and Thursday morning from 8 a.m. to 12. We have a seminar room that we call the touchdown space. So residents don't have an office, but they have a touchdown space. That means there's a cabinet in there and closets where they can bring their coats, their personal belongings, lock them in the cabinet. But normally, during a normal time, we meet from 8 to 12, Tuesday to Thursday morning in that seminar space. During COVID-19, we've had to go virtual. So now what's happening, since probably January of last year, we've had the seminars from 8 to 12 on Tuesday and Thursday virtual. So we have enough space in the two hospitals for the chaplains to find a private space so that they can do seminar work virtually, and then I usually Zoom from home and then go into work after the seminar completes. But yeah, there's a room where the chaplains normally meet, and we hope we'll be back there soon. We don't know when, but we hope to.
Now, I may have mentioned this to you along the way. One of the seminars that I experienced at UVA that I don't see here, but really came to appreciate, it was scary at first. Hospitalizations were clearly a lot longer in those days. So you could literally have a patient that you'd been working with for 3-4 weeks. And the seminar was, you would bring a patient on your watch that you've been ministering to into the seminar, and another one of your peers would interview that person. And then when the interview was over, the patient would leave, and you get some pretty honest critique about your pastoral skills. I thought that was very helpful.
I bet it was. That sounds pretty daunting. But yeah, absolutely.
You don't have any idea how much I had to pay the patients to say what I said.
Right. Yeah, I think your observation when you started describing that seminar is probably applicable, because now, I mean, did you guys have chapel back then, chapel service?
Yeah, last Sunday morning.
Was there good attendance?
You're really stretching my memory.
Yeah.
A couple dozen.
So there you go. A couple dozen would attend. We have at Christiana Hospital before COVID, we have a chapel service on Sunday at 9:30 at Christiana and 11 at Wilmington. At Christiana, we would have 3 or 4 people. At Wilmington, we'd have more because there was a more ambulatory patient care unit at Wilmington Hospital, and the staff would bring the members, the patients who wanted to go to chapel there. So the reason I'm saying that is that I think when I first started ministry, about the same time you were in CPE, like you said, people were in the hospital for a long time. You'd come in for a tonsillectomy and you'd stay a week. Well, you come in for a tonsillectomy now and you're gone the next day, if not the same day you get the surgery, right? And so, and the staff at our place is really, really busy all the time. So for them they would have to accompany a patient to chapel or to a seminar like that. For them to do that, it would be very difficult. Yeah. So because of several reasons, we don't do that seminar, and that sounds like a very intriguing seminar, actually.
Oh, it was. Mm-hmm. And if you were open to it, you wouldn't be in a CPE program like that if you weren't. Mm-hmm. You could do a lot of growing. You find out a lot about yourself and how you were being received, and mm-hmm. and this kind of. Another seminar, though, by the way, which was really daunting, was the preaching seminar.
Oh yeah.
So we had on a Sunday morning, we had to prepare the camera. I think the room was already set up. Make sure it was running, and conduct the service, and be nice to everybody as they left. All right. Now the real problem is that you did that on the weekend you were on call, mm-hmm. and this was a 700-bed hospital, and inevitably the buzzer went off.
While you're in the middle of your sermon.
Or right before you were to start the thing, and mm-hmm. Depending, of course, on when the beeper went off and what the emergency was, mm-hmm. or the request was, you had to. But making those decisions and living with those realities was a part of what we were supposed to learn.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's good learning, because the minister is faced with that for the rest of his or her career, right? So, mm-hmm. yeah, that's true. We have some of the same challenges sometimes. Now, one way that when we were doing chapel consistently, one way that we negotiated that is we usually have 2 residents on call on Sunday. And the 2 residents meet at Christiana Hospital for the 9:30 chapel. That's the bigger hospital. There's more going on there, so mm-hmm. there's more liability of an emergency interfering with the worship service. So one of the chaplains would cover the pager, as it were, while the other chaplain led chapel. And then the chaplain that covered the pager there would go to Wilmington and cover the 11 o'clock chapel service there. Wilmington is a smaller hospital. It's growing, however, and it's becoming more and more busy, and we're more and more visible. But that's the way we negotiated that. But yeah, and there have been times when our residents or our staff, who's ever doing the chapel service, have to decide this may or may not be a good, the kind of emergency that we need to postpone chapel, cancel chapel, actually. That's what happens usually. If there's a death has a priority, right? Or a trauma. Christiana Hospital is one of the busiest trauma centers in America. So we get a lot of traumas, motor vehicle accidents especially, mm-hmm. and other kind of accidents at Christiana Hospital. And unfortunately, we're getting more gunshot wounds, more interpersonal intentional injuries that come from Wilmington Christiana, because Christiana is a level 1 trauma center, which means it's highly equipped to deal with any kind of trauma. So those kind of emergent situations could take us away if I was the only chaplain in the hospital doing chapel service. Then I'd probably have to cancel chapel and go deal with that emergent situation.
Now, just a couple of things that come to mind. Verbatims as a responsibility, and any other didactic teaching experiences that they have during the course of the year.
Mm-hmm. So one of the major learning tools in clinical pastoral education is verbatim seminar. The verbatim is when a chaplain goes to make a visit, and in that visit he or she is challenged, or it was a great visit, or there was a particular theological issue that stands out, or there was a concern. Then the chaplain will go and follow a template that we have developed for them and record their assessment of the patient encounter, and then talk about the conversation, or record the conversation, and as much as they can remember, and then do an analysis. And then they bring that and present that all with all the identity of the patient and all of that redacted away. Oftentimes what the chaplain will do is change the name of the patient so that their identity is protected. They bring that to seminar, and we spend 90 minutes going over line by line the way the chaplain interacted with the patient, and that is kind of juxtaposed with the chaplain's learning goals. So what do you want to learn from presenting this? Why did you bring this? What do you want to learn? So yeah, that's a real important, and they do about 6 verbatims, which can be 9 to 15 pages, a unit, usually.
I had to do 104.
Yeah, I know that. You know, it's like the thing with during the Depression. Was it harder living through it or living through somebody talking about it? Right. So I've said the same thing.
Okay, now Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Rest of chaplaincy staff and departmental staff,
Yes.
Including the interns and so forth and so on, but also staff chaplains.
So we have 4 clinical staff chaplains. We have 3 at Christiana Hospital, palliative chaplain, a trauma chaplain, and a women's and children's chaplain. And these are full-time clinical staff. They're with us. Some have been with us for years. Some have been, well, all of them have been with us for at least 10 years. We have one who's been with us for over 30 years. And then at Wilmington Hospital, we have a coordinator of pastoral services who works at Wilmington. And then we have the 6 residents, divided 4 at Christiana, 2 at Wilmington. And then we will have at any given time anywhere from 6 to probably 9 interns who work part-time. So the residents and clinical staff are full-time, and the interns work part-time. And then we have a director, and we have 2 administrative support persons, one who works as a registrar for CPE and at Christiana, and one who works at Wilmington, supporting the Department of Pastoral Services at Wilmington. So that's clinical staff at any one time in the hospital could be 10 to 15. Some part-time, some full-time.
And your partner as an educator grew up in the program?
Yes, Reverend Meddy Messick came in 2006 as a resident, and then she became the cardiovascular chaplain at Christiana Hospital and worked in our department, and then she decided she wanted to do supervisory education, and so she entered EPICS, the Eastern Pennsylvania Institute for Clinical Supervision, which was meeting at the time at Lutheran Seminary in Philly, and she became certified and continues at our place. So yes, she was homegrown. I'm really proud of her work and how well she's done. And
I can remember when she was a resident.
Yeah, yeah, you can remember.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
she was a great resident too. She was, for example, I like to tell this story on her. She's given me permission. But she was a resident the year, you may remember, the great tragedy in Lancaster when those young girls were slaughtered by a crazy man. One of those families came to Christiana because one of those girls came to Christiana. She was brain dead, so the family came to Christiana to say goodbye to that daughter and then headed back to Lancaster General to say goodbye to their younger daughter. I can't even imagine. Nettie was the chaplain for that family when they came to Christiana, and I remember they came into the room to say goodbye to their daughter, and Nettie was there with them, gave them some space, was very appropriate with them, and then the doctor came in, and Nettie had had a conversation with them. The doctor came in and then started to leave really quickly, and Eddie grabbed him by the collar and said, "You can't leave yet. You have some questions to answer." Yeah. And brought him back in and sat him down. It was at that point I knew she was going to be a strong chaplain, and I wanted her to do supervisory education. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. She came in 2006. That was our first 12-month residency, 2006. She was one of the 6 that we had that year.
COVID.
Oh yes.
You know, it's our reality. I mean, it's not going to go away anytime soon, at least completely. There's some light at the end of the tunnel. We sure hope it isn't a train coming this way, but the signs are not good. And in what way do you see the pastoral care, the giving of pastoral care evolving through all of that?
Yeah, it's very interesting how most hospitals, medical centers who have active and really essential pastoral services, pastoral care departments, have learned some things about how to do pastoral care. Because right now, our chaplains do not go in the room of a COVID positive patient, nor do they go in the room of a COVID positive rule out patient. But our chaplains do provide support to these patients through the telephone, or we have some really amazing language services at Christiana Hospital. We have a lot of interpreters from several different languages who have helped us learn how to utilize iPads so that the nurse can take the iPad into the room with the patient, and the chaplain can be in the hallway and lead prayer or some intervention. So we've had to be creative because we don't go and visit COVID patients. Now we visit other patients. That's not a concern. We're continuing to visit other patients, but the COVID units and the COVID positive patients, we don't go in and see. So we support the staff, like we were talking about earlier, and we also use telephone and iPads and other technology to engage with the patient so that they can feel some support and presence from pastoral care. So that's had to stretch us because we never used that. We go into anybody's room just
Sure.
about, and even when there's a droplet precaution like COVID-19 is, all of our chaplains know how to don PPE, personal protective equipment, but we don't want to use that equipment when so much of it is needed by the staff. Mm-hmm. So we don't do that to go into the room, because we find other ways to engage so that we can save those really precious resources that our staff needs.
How is the present body of residents doing?
They're doing really well. They have really embraced the idea of doing seminar virtually. And that, I think what forms their thinking about that is that a lot of them thought, COVID-19, we won't be able to do our residency because people aren't going to have residencies. But because we've been able to figure out a way to do the educational process so that they can get their 300 hours of education. A chaplain, a unit of clinical pastoral education is 400 hours of clinically supervised ministry. It's usually divided into 300 hours of patient visits and 100 hours of education. So we've figured out a way to do individual supervision and group education virtually, and then they've embraced that. We do the same seminars we've always done. It's amazing how much you can see happening on Zoom. You do miss some things,
sure,
because you can't see everything, but people are engaged with one another and really working the process, and they're doing on-calls and very actively involved in their units. So they're doing well. They're doing well. We're just about ready to complete our first unit this year of residency. That'll be finished the middle of December. So we'll have 6 students who will successfully complete their first unit of clinical pastoral education in December.
And then I get to meet them finally somewhere in the middle. Somewhere.
Yeah, you'll meet them usually in February. You come and do a mid-year check-in interview with them. And that may be virtual.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I didn't get to meet them because something come up for me when we had the meeting where they were present in one form.
Last year.
This group.
Oh, this group. Oh, you mean when we did the welcome greeting and welcome with the professional advisory group? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dave is our veteran member.
Veteran.
He's the veteran member. He's been with us longer than you.
When do I get to be emeritus?
Well, we'll talk about that maybe another 5 years. Or when you raise it up.
There you go. Or when I can't make it to Christiana anymore.
Right.
Virtually or otherwise.
Right, yeah.
So anything else that comes to mind?
No, I just really appreciate you having me here. It's been fun to be in your place and talk with you about what I do and what I love to do, and appreciate your ministry here in Wilmington for so many years and your presence in our department. We really value your leadership and your wisdom about working with students, and so we're hoping for a better day soon. We hope this virus, we hope it's not a train headed our way. Yesterday we had 60 positive patients in the hospital. That's up from, that's as high as it's been since probably May.
That's in the hospital, not new patients. No,
that's patients in the hospital, and that's both hospitals. That's Wilmington and Christiana. So there's probably usually there's a little more at Christiana than Wilmington. So
has there been any losses of staff?
We haven't. We've had, in our department, we have had one staff member early in the pandemic who got COVID, but he's back with us, working strong, back on. And in fact, he didn't have a lot of symptoms during the time he was ill, so he did a lot of work from home until he could get the number of tests that were negative, which back in the early days, was a little more difficult than it is now. I don't know of any staff that we've lost at Christiana Hospital as a result of COVID. The hospital's been very careful to manage caregivers and their management of being safe during this time.
It's one of my primary concerns. I mean, I don't want to see people get sick and die.
Right.
Whoever it is. But the risk of burnout of caregivers in all of this, with it just getting worse and worse and worse. And if there was light at the end of the tunnel, a train coming the other way would at least be light.
Right, absolutely.
You'd have to duck it when it got closer, right. But oh man.
I think, and your concern is valid, because there is a lot of tired staff members who've worked really, really hard and who really dedicate themselves to caring for people. And so we really, as a pastoral care staff, want to support them in every way we can. And, the hospital has several programs present for caregiver wellness and that people can take advantage of during this difficult time. So I think a lot of people are.
Yeah. Well, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot.
Thank you for the time.
So long, St. Mark. See you next time.